I like the way that Linda Hagler uses a wide variety of plants together with her favorite roses. One striking combination right in front of the house features snapdragons called the Rocket Series, aptly named as they practically explode with color. Snapdragons will reseed on occasion if happy.
Well, this one is a biennial. It will come back next year, and I'll lose a few of them when it gets really, really hot, but then they'll die back, and next year I'll have a few of them come up, and I may buy a few more in the fall and plant them again.
What size were they?
About 2 or 3 inches tall.
2 or 3 inches tall. So this is a robust variety. It gets about 3 feet tall.
Yes, that's the Rocket Series.
The series gives you a whole range of colors. You don't know what you're going to get.
Exactly, and I like it like that because I get surprises in the spring, and I love lots of color, and I don't really try to plant so that you have just one series of colors. I like a lot of color.
So you planted the seedlings of the snapdragons in the fall, the seed of the larkspur in the fall.
Well, that particular one seeded itself there.
Okay.
I didn't seed it there. I'm not sure where it came from, but I like it, so I left it.
And this rose is a single, which is really pretty.
Altissimo, the bright, bright red.
Is that a shrub rose that you're sort of treating as a climber?
Yes. And I cut that back quite a bit this fall and early spring, a little bit more, and it just loves to grow.
And it blends, it picks up a lot of the colors in your snapdragons.
Yes.
And this is one of my favorite roses. This is Buff Beauty, isn't it?
Yes, I love
Look at that
rose.
color. It comes out so dark there, and then it sort of, even when it fades, it's pretty. And that's another rambler sort or shrub.
That's a shrub, yes.
And I think it's got a good scent, doesn't it?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Now.
And I really pruned that one a lot. And it was a nice surprise this spring to find how pretty it is. You know, I think a lot of people are afraid to prune too heavily, but sometimes it's just what they need.
It's obvious that Linda and Dan aren't afraid of growing roses. As a matter of fact, they're having a blast.
This has become a great hobby, and I'm rather proud of what we've done here.
There's one thing that I want to tell people that think they can't grow roses. They're really not hard to take care of. If you think back of all the old cemetery roses that are still there and all the roses that in old home places, anybody can have a rose. It just makes a smile on my face. I always tell people if they come out and they see me smiling in the garden, I'm really not crazy. I'm just smiling because I'm happy.
Whenever I visit gardens, I make new friends and discover new plants. Here are some treasures from Linda and Dan Hagler's garden. I love these poppies. They almost look like they're made of tissue paper. I also like it that you can dry the seed pods for fall arrangements. And roses. There were so many to choose from. Every one I saw was my favorite. As an example, Country Dancer is such a beautiful rose, yet it's hardy enough to withstand cold winters. And the cut flowers last a long time. Another rose that took my breath away was Abraham Darby. I love that old-fashioned cottage look. And what about Altissimo? It's so red. I can just see this one against a gray, rustic fence. If you want to be inspired, visit someone else's garden. You never know what you might find. Join us again on A Gardener's Diary. A life story that's as colorful as her garden. She began her professional life as a dietitian, working in places like Texas A&M University and as food service coordinator for the Manhattan Project at the end of World War II. She married her husband, the late Air Force Colonel John Groves, shortly before the war, and as a military couple, they were always on the move. Somewhere along the way, she developed an intense interest in plants. After the couple retired to Oxford, Georgia, she became a wholesale grower and a landscape designer. She was also instrumental in the development of the instant color method of marketing nursery plants. Displaying plants in full bloom in easy-to-use containers helped fuel the explosion of garden interest in the South. Now in her 80s, Sarah has long since retired to her own garden in Oxford, but she's still active on the lecture circuit, sharing a lifetime of experience with other gardeners. Sarah, we're here in Oxford, Georgia.
Right. Oxford is a part of Covington, and actually it's where Emory University was first founded. You know, we do have Emory Junior College is here in Oxford, and a great town.
And it's really, we're almost into summer. We're not quite into summer yet, we're still in spring, but it's just about summertime.
We're just before the longest day of the year, I believe, isn't it?
That's right.
Right.
And how long have you gardened here?
Oh, that's hard to say. I put in rocks first, lots of the Stone Mountain rocks, and then planted holly trees. My husband was Air Force Colonel, retired, and we retired and came here in '61.
And you've got, these hollies are really the anchors for your whole front garden, which is just filled with color.
The hollies were the first things that I put in, and they're planted on the outer perimeter all around.
This is a magnificent specimen, this latifolia right here. This is just, how many years do you think this represents? I mean, what size was it?
Well, it was in about a gallon can when I put it in.
Let me ask you, for latifolia though, for gardeners that aren't familiar with it, that would be a good evergreen holly for the South?
Oh, it's a wonderful evergreen holly for the South. And I have seen it as far as North Carolina, and I think in Virginia.
And
it's a good substitute for magnolia too.
The clusters of fruit, that's going to be loaded.
Fantastic. Yeah,
those will be
loaded.
red.
Oh yes, those are red.
And when do those color up? Late summer?
About November or December.
Oh.
And then they're still on real late in the spring. That's one of the nice things about the latifolias, it holds its berries for a long time.
And you've limbed these up over the years.
Well, I have to limb them up to have enough space to plant all the other things that I enjoy. You don't have to worry about limbing hollies up. It doesn't hurt them.
We're in a fairly shady spot here, but you've got lots of bright color.
Well, don't you like the bright color?
Of course.
And that is one of my favorite plants. That's the lichness. It is very hard to hear. I think it will not be any harder than zone 7, but it does reseed. It lights up dark areas, and it just is beautiful with the hemicallus blooms at the same time.
Did you pick the combination to complement each other, that soft color of the daylily and the orange of the lychnis?
Sometimes I pick color, sometimes I don't. It just depends on the mood that I'm in. But this is my orange garden, all this area along in here.
And the way that this little flower is fringed, I like that.
That's
sort
nice,
of lacy,
isn't it?
and it
Yeah.
looks like it's getting lots of seed. Will that reseed for you?
Oh yes, it reseeds.
This hybrid lychnis does well, it appears, in high shade. Will it also do well, do you think, or do you know, in full sun?
Erica, everybody worries about full sun and shade. And here, in this area, in the South, if you get 4 hours of good light, or 5 hours of good light, that's satisfactory. And you have morning sun, you have afternoon sun, so it gets that good light. But it also gives you good color in the shade. Do you like the combination of the background with the other plants?
I do. I like the Japanese painted fern with the oak leaf hydrangea. And what would we do without hellebores?
Well, hellebores, and look how the begonia grandis has reseeded in with it. And the Japanese painted fern is really very interesting.
And the crepe myrtle.
Crepe myrtle. Yes, the white crepe myrtle.
Natchez?
Natchez, yes. A wonderful crepe myrtle.
We're in another very lush area. You do a lot of layering. You've got 3 different types of hydrangeas grouped together here, and then you've surrounded them with this beautiful herbaceous layer of hardy begonias and calamaris.
Calamaris. Well, I have to layer, Erica. If I'm going to have what I want, I've got to put it close together on top of each other in order to get it in this small area that I have.
This is a garden. Just this area here could be a garden for somebody without a lot of space.
You sound exactly like my late husband.
What was that? He thought you had too many
He
plants?
thought I had far too many plants.
Now, I would never think that, Sarah. I would never think you had too many plants.
I
but
wouldn't either. But
this-
don't you like this hydrangea?
This is Aishia.
That's Aisha.
Tell me, is the color pretty stable on this hydrangea, or does it vary depending on the soil?
I have never seen Aisha blue. I think that it stays in the pink, but it starts out white, and then it turns pink.
And how
I'm
do
not
you...
sure whether it changes with the pH. I'm not sure. I know I do have acid soil here, so it's pink in this acid soil.
And the hardy begonia does make
don't even mention those things. I paid $4.95 mail order for one begonia grandis, and now I bet there's thousands of dollars they reseed, but they're wonderful plants. And if you notice the leaf underneath, notice that nice color.
That's great.
From a giant holly tree to a miniature cyclamen, Sarah's garden is full of contrasts, just like the place where she first became interested in plants. Stay with us.
If your kid...
The early summer blooms are dazzling in Sarah Grove's garden in Oxford, Georgia. This garden pioneer was also a pioneer in the early days of television. She was stationed at the Air Force Base in Fairbanks, Alaska with her husband and became the host of her own television show.
Alaska is a wonderful place. There's the extreme in day length of an extreme in temperature, and actually that's where I very first became very, very interested in plants and how plants grow and how they are influenced by their environment. On the TV program, it was an exchange of information between the old-timer and the newcomer. An interesting program was on how to dress for the Arctic climate. I did have Eskimos that were there, and then one particular interesting program was a Chinese lady who was trying to teach the people, actually I have a cameraman, how to eat with chopsticks. Many of the programs were on plants and all types of activities in Alaska.
If I could hear what that holly had to say, I bet it could tell us a lot of history. It looks as if it's been here for a long time.
Well, actually, I went to the National Arboretum to visit some of the people that had been on my TV show in Alaska. John Creech was one of them, and he gave me a cutting from that particular holly that he had grown as a seedling. It was about that tall and was wrapped in a wet paper towel. And I came back and I had no tools, and I really never planted anything before, so I dug a hole in the ground with this tablespoon. Water came gushing up, so I took a rock and put over the water and moved over a bit and planted it. And
Look at it.
It grew and it grew and it exploded, and now it's been cut. This is 1/3 of the holly now.
Wow.
Actually, it's a brother of the holly that's in the trade that is named Nellie R. Stevens.
It's hard to believe that this holly, which is gigantic and actually creates a perfect spot for your woodland garden, started out as a little rooted cutting.
Rooted cutting, right.
And you've got a few unusual plants.
Rhodea, for example, I think is one of my favorite plants. It's actually the Chinese sacred plant, and it does well even in full sun or shade.
Now, I know that they get a spike of red berries or red-orange berries.
Right.
And when does that happen?
In the fall of the year.
So for people that want something different and unusual that will provide real bold evergreen texture in a woodland garden, this is a good choice.
It's an excellent choice. And did you notice over here, here's the variegated rhodea.
Oh, I see it. Yeah, that's very pretty.
Very choice and very rare.
I've never grown hardy cyclamen, but I've often lusted after them, and here you have them just looking happy as can be.
You know, Erica, you're supposed to have 40 years, they say, if you want to have a cyclamen bed. I've had this bed, the entire thing here, for 4 years, And this is the persicum, and I am delighted that it's blooming now so that you can see it. I'm just so thrilled with it, and I've mixed it in with the tyrellas and the acerums.
The hardy ginger, that is
Hardy
pretty.
ginger, right. That particular one is Callaway there, which was found by Fred Galley, you know, at Callaway Gardens.
And is that a heuchera?
Yes, right.
That's a pretty heuchera. So hardy gingers and heuchera and
a rhodea.
which is good for foliage.
Right, and the sarcococa, which all of those are wonderful foliage plants. You do have to really prepare the ground. It has to have good drainage. If you notice the gravel that's all over. And I have added to this bed the Stone Mountain washed granite that we're so fortunate to have here. And in the foliage comes after the blossom.
It's that mottled foliage that I like so much. This has been, something has been chewing on it, but this will get a lot more foliage. I like the way the petals are, what do they call that? Reflexed back.
It really is not like the florist cyclamen. It's not as large, but it's such a sweet, delicate little thing.
This hydrangea produces huge clusters of double flowers, and Sarah's garden containers are literally of Olympic proportions. Stay with us.
Sarah Grove's garden in Oxford, Georgia is just outside Atlanta. When Atlanta hosted the Summer Olympics, Sarah was involved in the beautification of the city and orchestrated the horticultural displays for the equestrian competition. She uses what she learned that summer in her garden today. When most people talk about container gardening, they're not talking about containers on a scale as grand as this, and they really are set off by your use of evergreen hollies throughout the garden.
Throughout, right. Well, this is an outgrowth of the equestrian site for the Olympics. You have to have something if you have horse shows so that you can change between your jump courses and different competition. So I came up with the idea of using containers, having them all completely planted. We used almost 1,000 of the 3-foot in diameter, and then around 500 of the 6-foot, and you can just imagine how fantastic they were. But they're so wonderful to use and use in your own landscaping because things grow off beautifully in them, and it's easier to keep them watered too. It does cost for your material that you use, but I make lots of my own compost, and then I use a wetting agent which helps to hold the moisture and then disperse it to the plants.
Well, that's one of those that you mix into the soil.
Yes, you mix that into the soil and it helps to keep it. And then if it were planted out in the landscape, and then you have things that come up around the side, and actually you hide the containers where you can't even see them.
This is, look at the size of that flower cluster on this oak leaf hydrangea. What do you feed your plants, Sarah?
Oh, it's compost. They really, and always when I plant a plant, I add superphosphate to the soil here, and that gives you strong roots and blooms.
Well, this has certainly got lots of strong blooms. This is snowflake.
Right, and you know, this grows on the East Coast here in Georgia. You find it all down around Savannah, in that area there.
But snowflake has been a good performer for you.
Oh, yeah, just wonderful.
Now, the only thing I noticed is that these kind of, you almost need to stake it up.
This is a young plant, and I have it staked here, but see the stake?
Mm-hmm.
But it's grown. See, this one was started from a cutting from that. That's the parent plant. This is young now, and I need to get it staked up high.
Well, now here is this bloom a little fresher?
Yeah, it
comes out pure white.
Well, I wouldn't say fresh, young. It's pure white, and then it begins to turn green, and then goes to the beige color. It's very good to use in dried arrangements if you like house plants. I like my plants outside.
As far as my experience with oak leaf hydrangea, they can take a good bit of sun.
Oh yeah, they can be in full sun. Or they do in shade.
And the other thing I know about oak leaf hydrangea, for people that are always questioning, when do I prune things, I think the least amount of pruning you give this, the better.
Oh yeah, I've never pruned this. I've never cut back a dead bloom or pruned or anything. I just let it shed off on its own.
An aptly named daylily looks good enough to eat. And an old cabin that's been in Sarah's family for centuries has done its own share of moving around the country. When we continue.
As the wife of an Air Force colonel, Sarah spent much of her life living in far-flung places. Yet she has strong ties to the region of the country she grew up in. Part of that family history is in her garden in Oxford, Georgia. Not many people have what looks to be an authentic log cabin as a garden ornament.
Well, that's been in my family since the late 1700s. These are the original logs, and we've moved. It has been moved 3 times. It was moved one time to my great-grandmother's, and then to my grandmother's, and then to my mother's place where Ruth, my sister, lives now. And then she didn't want it, so I decided to move it here. We did add the cedar shingle roof ceiling to it. I can remember as a child, I remember my grandmother saying to me, I said, Gran, what is that thing? She said, well, that was your great-granddaddy's corn crib. But I don't think he kept corn there. I think it's where he kept his corn liquor.
And you got it surrounded by caryopteris?
Isn't that the most wonderful caryopteris?
It is.
It's still in the 5-gallon containers. I just recently acquired those.
Well, it's just, I think it's amazing that you have had this in your family and preserved it all these years.
All these years, right.
This is a great example of the advantage of limbing up your mature hollies. You've limbed this up and you've created this garden underneath with this hardy alstroemeria, which is a plant I've always wanted to grow, but I just haven't gotten around to it.
Well, it's easy to grow.
Just the flowers and even the seeds are pretty on this.
Right, yeah. It just works so well with all other type plants too.
And it's great with this daylily you
Isn't
paired
it
it up
though?
with.
Look at the face of that daylily there.
That's beautiful.
Look at that. Isn't
Now,
that
what's the name of that daylily?
that's strawberry candy.
Well, it does look almost edible.
It's one of my favorites.
And the hardy geranium, I wouldn't think of having that pink next to it, but it works.
But it works well, doesn't it?
So this is hardy alstroemeria. Is there any trick to growing these at all?
No.
You just,
I mean, they just grow. They come up unexpected places.
and they like,
And it's the color red that will blend in. Although it is a blue red, it does blend in with any color. You can see it working there with the purple that goes to the yellow side and then tying right in with the pink. Nature sometimes just develops color schemes for you that's the right thing. It's a very informal, close to my heart, personal garden. It's a place where I can be alone if I want to be alone. And the flowers are so wonderful. They don't talk back to you. They embrace you. I think it's a garden for a person who really wants to discover plants.